The movie starts in the beautiful city Hawaii, famous for its enjoyable sea and vast forests. The adventurous young man, Sean, who loves riding his mountain bike so much that he's a pro, performing dangerous stunts and navigating many rough paths. One day, while in the forest, he hears strange noises nearby and suddenly sees someone hanging upside down in front of him, telling him to run quickly before they catch him. A luxurious car appears, and out comes the gangster Eddie and his men. They start beating up the man because he's a prosecutor who accused Eddie of serious charges that could land him in prison for a long time or even get him executed. To set an example, Eddie kidnapped him and keeps hitting him with a baseball bat until he dies, sending a message that anyone who opposes him will face the same fate. After witnessing this, Sean quickly tries to escape, but the noise from his motorcycle catches the gang's attention. They try to kill him and shoot at him, but they fail. Frightened, Sean rushes home, unsure of what to do. He later sees on the news the details of the murder, with no one knowing who committed the crime. Sean is shocked when someone tries to break down his apartment door, and is even more terrified when he realizes it's Eddie's men coming to kill him. He quietly moves and escapes through the window. At that moment, FBI Agent Flynn appears, tells Sean to stay calm, and waits for Eddie's men. As soon as they enter the apartment, Flynn shoots them, taking them out. Flynn then takes Sean, and they escape the place before the rest of the gang arrives. Flynn asks Sean why he didn't report the crime to the police. Sean explains that he knows the city's police are corrupt and suspected they were working with Eddie. Flynn confirms Sean's suspicions, introducing himself and taking him to the investigation building. However, Sean is still terrified and doesn't want to get involved against Eddie's gang after everything he's seen, to the point where he even denies being in the forest at all. But Flynn knows Sean was there from his fingerprints on the soda can he left near the body. He persuades Sean that he must testify against the gang, promising that if he does, they can protect him, and no one will harm him. Flynn warns that if Sean refuses, the gang will keep hunting him down until they kill him, as he is a witness to their crime and they must eliminate him. At Honolulu International Airport, an important flight is about to take off. Among the passengers is the famous rapper 3Gs, along with his crew, Troy and Leroy. Naturally, the girls are thrilled when they see him, eager to get autographs and take pictures. We're introduced to the flight attendants, Tiffany and Claire, who are surprised when the FBI starts searching the plane. Flynn and Sean are boarding, and the problem is they're taking up all the first-class seats. The pilot informs Claire that she'll have to deal with the first-class passengers and convince them to move to economy seats, which is, of course, a huge headache for her. At the same time, we see an employee making a suspicious move after loading some crates onto the plane. He sprays them with a type of pheromone and tells someone on the phone that these pheromones will drive them crazy. Flynn and Sean arrive and take the seats they want, while Claire endures all the complaints and criticism from the first-class passengers, forced to stay silent. Sean is thoroughly enjoying his first experience in first class, where he meets another agent, Sanders, Flynn's longtime partner. They communicate with their colleague, Harris, back at the headquarters, updating him on their movements and the plane they're on. Meanwhile, in the cramped economy class, passengers are uncomfortable, especially a businessman who's annoyed by the barking dog next to him. The dog's owner, Mercedes, is happily taking selfies with her pet, much to his frustration. On the other side, a child with his mother, Maria, is crying nonstop, and unable to bear it, the businessman gets up to change his seat. When the rapper 3Gs and his crew arrive, they're initially displeased with their seating. However, 3G's mood changes when he spots Mercedes, and he becomes excited and happy. Meanwhile, two kids, Tommy and his brother, board the plane, nervous about traveling alone for the first time. Throughout all this, Tiffany can't stop thinking about Sean. She was instantly attracted to him when she first saw him and takes the opportunity to be near him. Once all the passengers are aboard, the plane gets ready for takeoff. The flight attendants begin explaining the important safety instructions that could save their lives in case of an emergency. Once everything is set, the pilot and his co-pilot Rick receive the order to take off. As the plane ascends, the flight attendants begin serving drinks to the passengers. Tiffany seizes the opportunity to sit next to Sean, intrigued by him. Initially, she thinks he's a dangerous criminal, but quickly learns he's going to testify against a gangster, which she finds incredibly exciting. Amid what seems like a regular flight, something unusual is hidden in the plane. A large crate filled with highly dangerous snakes of various kinds. At a specific time, this crate is set to open on its own. Meanwhile, a boxer named Chen catches the eye of a flight attendant, who mentions that he also boxes. He tries to show off with some moves, but it backfires, leading to the passengers mocking him after he embarrasses himself. When Flynn gets up to check that everything is in order on the plane, he finds Claire upset and treating him poorly. She's angry because their actions put her in a difficult position with the passengers, and she's had to endure some harsh words. To calm her down, Flynn apologizes for what happened and then walks away. Of course, 3Gs doesn't miss a chance and gets to know Mercedes, sitting next to her. At this moment, the cursed crate opens, and the snakes, driven wild by the pheromones, are released into the plane. They start attacking everything in sight. In the passenger cabin, a couple of young man and woman, who are in a relationship, head to the restroom to smoke a cigarette. They turn off the smoke alarm and start playing around. Suddenly, a snake drops from the ceiling and bites the young man and woman on their necks amidst their screams. No one notices anything wrong because they are unaware of the danger and believe they know what they're doing. As the snakes continue to move through the plane, they pass by the control room, causing wires to snap and leading to electrical issues. The alarm in the control cabin starts blaring, and the captain realizes there's a disaster with a malfunction on the plane. Rick immediately informs air traffic control about the catastrophe and requests emergency assistance. Meanwhile, the snakes spread among the passenger seats, moving quietly without anyone noticing. When someone gets up to use the restroom, a snake emerges from the seat and bites him in a sensitive area. In shock and pain, he hits his head against the wall, suffering severe injuries and collapsing to the floor. To address the issue, the captain descends to the control room to restore power and regain control of the plane. As soon as he manages to fix the electrical problem, he's attacked by a massive snake that bites him on the neck, causing him to collapse on the floor within seconds. Rick descends to help and, mistakenly thinking the captain has had a heart attack, becomes alarmed. Claire, terrified, runs to Flynn and Sanders, taking them to a place to check on the captain and assist. Rick reports the situation to air traffic control, instructing the passengers to fasten their seatbelts and remain seated. However, he's unaware that a snake is nearby in the cabin. Upon seeing the situation, Rick panics and continues to strike at the snake, accidentally causing the oxygen masks to deploy. Along with the masks, more snakes emerge from the ceiling. In a terrifying moment, the snakes begin attacking passengers, biting the nearest ones. The plane erupts into chaos as everyone screams, rushes, and tries to escape in a state of panic. Sanders descends to assess the situation and freezes in place when he sees a large number of snakes on the stairs. Unable to move, the snakes continue their frenzied attack, and some passengers try to defend themselves by fighting off the snakes. Due to the lightning, the plane experiences turbulence, causing passengers to fall, including Sanders, who finds himself surrounded by terrifying snakes and screams in fear while being bitten. Flynn descends to defend him with an electric stun gun, causing the snakes to flee. Flynn assesses the disaster. Passengers are falling everywhere, and the snakes are attacking everyone. He tries to navigate through the seats, electrocuting any snake in his path, and urges the passengers to move quickly toward the front of the plane. Anyone bitten faces certain death due to the venom. Unfortunately, Tommy, who is hiding, gets bitten by a snake and is helpless. In the chaos, passengers trample over a person lying on the ground, killing him. 3Gs, terrified, runs to hide in the restroom. When he opens the door, he is confronted by the bodies of the two people who had been inside. As Flynn navigates through the chaos, he sees passengers being bitten by the dozens and struggles to help them, given the sheer number of snakes. He focuses on electrocuting as many snakes as possible. Once he manages to gather the passengers at the front, he starts building a barricade with luggage to block off the snakes. Mercedes, who has fainted and fallen, regains consciousness to find snakes moving toward her and dead bodies scattered around. Overwhelmed with fear and unable to move, she screams for help. Sean appears, lifts her onto his shoulder, and carries her to the front of the plane, rescuing her from the danger. Flynn and the passengers in the front secure all possible entry points to prevent the snakes from getting through. Claire realizes that Tommy and his brother are missing and informs Flynn. They search until they find them hiding, discovering that Tommy is injured. Meanwhile, Flight attendant Grace hears a baby crying from the area where the snakes are. She rushes through the danger, locating the baby and grabbing him just before a snake can bite him. She shields the baby with her own body and is bitten in the process, saving the child and bringing him back to the front with Maria. Sadly, the venom is too potent, and both Grace and Sanders succumb to the poison in a horrific manner. Flynn desperately looks for a solution to contain the disaster and prevent it from escalating. He asks Rick for help, who responds that he is unsure what to do, given that they are at an altitude of 25,000 feet, and any mistake with the wires could cause the plane to crash. Flynn realizes there's no solution but to fly for 2 hours to reach the nearest airport and alert air traffic control about the situation. Claire tries to find a doctor on the plane and discovers one, but he is dead with a snake in his mouth, leaving them without any medical help for Grace. Flynn is frustrated by this and calls Harris, informing him that Eddie must have placed the snakes on the plane to kill Sean. Even if Sean isn't bitten, Eddie likely ensured the plane would crash and be a disaster. Harris immediately instructs his team to find the best venomous snake expert they can as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, after Leroy is bitten on his backside, a flight attendant tells him they need to suck out the venom to reduce its effects. Leroy agrees, but when he realizes that the attendant who will do this isn't his regular attendant, he refuses. Due to the weak venom of the snake that bit Tommy, his arm is swelling. Maria tries to help by applying olive oil to the wound and making an incision to extract the venom. While Sean remains paralyzed by fear and frustration, Flynn scolds him, emphasizing that Eddie is responsible for all this chaos, and they need to get rid of him. Flynn insists that if Sean dies, it will have been in vain, and his main task now is to answer Harris when he calls. Flynn notices that the snakes are attempting to breach the barrier they created, so he attacks them with a fire extinguisher and crafts weapons from broken bottles to kill them. Harris successfully contacts snake expert Stephen Price, who is taken from his lab. Harris briefs Price on the situation on the plane, but Price informs him that they need to identify the types of snakes on board to determine the appropriate antivenom for each. Since hospitals only have antivenoms for common snakes, and obtaining additional antivenoms would take time, Price instructs Flynn to prepare for any situation. Flynn informs Price that the barriers they set up are ineffective, leading Price to conclude that the snake's aggressive behavior is likely due to pheromones. He advises Flynn to identify the exact types of snakes to effectively respond. Meanwhile, passengers, terrified by the snakes, decide to move to the second level where first-class seats are located, and Claire is unable to stop them. Passengers demand that Flynn explain the presence of the snakes on the plane, but he refuses and threatens them to return to their seats. Sean reveals that the snakes are there because he witnessed a murder committed by a notorious crime boss. Flynn then assures them that he can handle any danger and emphasizes that, to survive and reach safety, they must follow his instructions. The first step is to find any dead snakes to help the doctor identify them and get the antivenom. Meanwhile, Rick, piloting the plane and believing he is alone, suddenly encounters a snake beside him. It bites his arm, and he struggles with it until he falls into the equipment room. After the passengers gather several dead snakes, Mercedes suggests taking photos and sending them to the doctor to speed up identification rather than describing each snake. Meanwhile, Claire senses something is wrong when the plane tilts forward. She rushes to the cockpit, finds Rick fallen, and is attacked by a snake. Trapped in the cockpit, she struggles but eventually kills the snake with an axe. As the plane begins to descend rapidly, passengers feel something is wrong. Flynn rushes to the cockpit, discovers the disaster, and asks Claire to help him control the plane. As the remaining passengers move to the upper deck, chaos ensues. A massive snake falls from the ceiling, causing panic. The weight of the panicked passengers causes the stairs to collapse, resulting in them falling and being attacked by the giant snake. The snake kills a businessman, crushing and swallowing him. Using this distraction, the passengers manage to barricade the stairs to keep the snakes from reaching the upper deck. Flynn and Claire, struggling to control the plane, manage to stabilize it just above the ocean. They communicate with air traffic control about the situation. In the cockpit, Rick, who is still alive, returns and activates the autopilot system. Meanwhile, the passengers successfully build a barrier using an inflatable raft to prevent the snakes from reaching their new location. With the new information from Dr. Price, it's clear that the snakes are a deadly mix from around the world, and finding the antidote will take days due to the need to gather samples. The only known source of such diverse snakes is a man living in the desert. As the situation on the plane stabilizes somewhat, the passengers try to calm down and cope with the crisis. Grace, despite her severe condition, finds solace in having saved the child. However, the rising temperature due to the malfunctioning air conditioning and air purification system poses a new threat, making breathing difficult. Flynn learns from Rick that the engines are also having issues and that they need to reduce speed. To fix the air conditioning, someone must manually restart it. Meanwhile, Flynn encounters a frustrated 3Gs who is upset about the lack of air conditioning. Flynn tries to calm him down, recognizing that maintaining order is crucial in their current predicament. With 3Gs having taken the gun and being in a state of despair, his friends struggle to comprehend his actions. Flynn manages to retrieve the weapon from him and restrain him. The situation worsens as the power cuts out, leading to Grace's death and leaving Claire devastated, feeling her end is near. Flynn comforts Claire, encouraging her to stay strong as he cannot handle everything alone and needs her support. Flynn descends to manually restart the air conditioning system. Upon opening the door, he encounters snakes but manages to deal with them. He navigates through the wiring passage to reach the control panel, where he fights off more snakes and successfully restores power and air conditioning. On his way back, Flynn is surrounded by snakes. Despite his efforts to defend himself, he is temporarily overpowered but manages to kill a snake just before it can bite him. Harris successfully reaches the snake farm in the desert and confronts the deranged owner. They exchange gunfire, and Harris manages to injure him. The owner falls onto a snake cage, breaking it and being bitten by a snake in the process. In his final moments, the owner reveals the location of the antidote and provides information on all the types of snakes on the plane, confirming that Eddie was the one who funded and purchased the snakes. This information also implicates Eddie in orchestrating the attack on the plane. Flynn and the passengers are relieved to hear that hope is not lost. However, when Flynn tries to speak with Rick, he finds him dead, and the cockpit is overrun with snakes. Flynn quickly seals it off, ensuring no further harm from the dangerous creatures inside. Flynn and the passengers face a new challenge with no one to pilot the plane. They find Troy, who has over 2,000 hours of experience with flight simulation games. To access the cockpit with the snakes still around, Flynn orders everyone to secure themselves in their seats. He then shoots out the cockpit window, and the rapid decompression causes everything inside, including the snakes, to be sucked out of the plane. This leaves the cockpit clear for Troy to take control and navigate the plane safely. Flynn and Trow enter the cockpit, with Trow thrilled to finally be piloting a real plane. The decompression causes the opening to widen, and Claire and Tiffany cling tightly to their seats to avoid being sucked out. The remaining snakes are also pulled out of the cabin. Troy manages to stabilize the plane and lower its altitude to normalize the pressure. He contacts air traffic control, who are shocked by his unconventional approach and the situation he's describing. When air traffic control learns that Troy's experience is from flight simulation games, they panic, thinking he's not a real pilot. They instruct him to hand over the controls to someone who understands flying. Flynn insists that Troy is the only one with any flying experience and pleads for their assistance to ensure a safe landing. Troy, despite the pressure, manages to land the plane. He begins the descent too quickly at first, but ultimately navigates the plane sideways to manage the landing. The plane lands safely, and everyone on board erupts in relief and celebration. The police and paramedics rush to the place, helping the survivors disembark from the plane. The survivors are relieved and overjoyed to have escaped the nightmare safely. The medical team identifies the snake species that bit Tommy and administers the appropriate antidote, which helps him recover. As Sean prepares to exit the plane, a snake appears and tries to bite him. Flynn quickly draws his weapon and shoots the snake, saving Sean. It turns out that Sean was wearing a protective vest, so he is unharmed by the snake and the gunfire. With the crisis over and Flynn and Sean having become friends, they exchange contact details with the women they admire. They decide to head to the beach to enjoy some surfing together.